guys, welcome. It's so good to see you all here. If we haven't met, and if you didn't hear all the wonderful things I paid my husband to say about me, my name is Amy, and I am the kids director here at Church on the Drive, and I'm excited to be here. But me standing here before you is a little bit like when you're taking your 7th grade civics class and you realize through like some horrible chain of events that like the secretary of the Department of Interior become president. That's kind of how I'm up here today. Because not only is Josh out, right, our pastor is down in Guatemala, but like 3 more ministry members are gone. Debbie Harrell, who's our minister for missions, she's in Guatemala as well. Greg, who's normally up there, who leads worship, he's out this week. Sarah's out. You get down the list, you get the kids director. So I'm gonna do my best this morning to make it through without any STEM-related object-based lessons. We're not gonna use glue sticks. We're not gonna use safety scissors, because as we say in kids worship, we are in big church where the grown-ups go. So if you've been with us for the last 9 weeks out of 10, blessed are the long-suffering, you know that we have been doing a message on 9 lives. And this is all about this tool, this Enneagram tool that we use to kind of help identify different personality tests. A group of Christian writers has kind of come together, used some research to kind of classify everybody into 9 different personalities. So we've kind of gone around the clock. We've talked about the 8s, 9s, and the 1s. Everybody kind of in the gut triad, the instinctual people. They kind of just know what to do. Gotta tell you, I'm a little envious of these gut people, and you're gonna hear about why. We came around the corner. We went into the helpers and the performers and the individualists. These are people who do things with their heart. They care about you. They care about others. These are good people. And last week, we kind of came around the corner all the way, and we talked about the 5s. So those of you good with the maths know that we are on the Enneagram 6s this week. These 3, this 5, 6, and 7, they're kind of in what we call the head triad. So these are people who do things because they're thinking about it all the time. They're going to make decisions based on their thoughts and based on logics, and sitting right in the middle of all of that, the people in their head the most, are the Enneagram 6s. They're known as your loyalist. You also will hear them called the guardian, the defender, troopers, the skeptic. My favorite is putting those 2 together, that first and last one together. They're known as the loyal skeptic. And I'm going to reveal a little secret right here that Josh hasn't told you, right? He hasn't revealed his Enneagram number at all. But I'm going to tell you straight up, because we're going to be a little bit more personal, conversational. I'm a recovering Enneagram 6. So it kind of worked out really well that Josh was gone this week, so I can kind of speak a little bit about myself. So if you want to know anything bad about the 6s, you're going to have to look it up later. So today we're going to talk about everything that is good about your Enneagram 6s. So the first thing you kind of need to know about your 6s is their basic desire is they are going to want to have security and stability. So the message that a 6 may have heard early on, that we all hear eventually, is that the world is not a safe place, right? And this is something we generally kind of keep away from our kids. We don't want them to discover these hard truths about life. But for 6s, they may have heard this message a little bit early, so it kind of alters who they are and how they react to the world. They may have grown up in an unsafe home or some type of instability. They may have had a personal tragedy happen to them young. They may have had kind of overprotective parents that kind of always kept them on their guard. So that's going to be your basic desire of this 6. So if you can imagine that's your basic desire, your basic fear is naturally going to be if you're without guidance or support, right? If all you want is stability and security from this world, you're gonna kind of be your compass is gonna start spinning, and you're not gonna be able to find your true north if you don't have guidance and support as an Enneagram 6. And then the deadly sin, where all this is kind of lead for your 6s, your deadly sin is going to be worry. Now, really what you're going to read, like if you follow, and I can make all sorts of recommendations if you want on books, there's a lot of great podcasts. There are several Instagram accounts that I follow on the Enneagram. If you want to know any of those, I'm happy to share. They're generally going to tell you that the Enneagram 6's deadly sin is fear. But fear is more like, oh my gosh, there's a mountain lion, it's going to eat me. But really with an Enneagram 6, it's like, I'm on this path in the mountains, there could be a mountain lion, right? Like it's not quite there. They're worried that something could happen. They imagine all sorts of terrible scenarios and probabilities about what could happen. So really it's more kind of like an underlying worry that something bad is going to happen. So for your 6s, because their general desire, their basic desire is for security and stability, these 6s, they're going to have a strong need for consistency, and they're going to appreciate the rules. These are going to be your dutiful people. These are your reliable people. These are your committed people. That's where you get kind of that loyalist idea, or from your Enneagram 6s. They have a plan for everything. They espouse the Scout motto, be prepared. I don't know if there's any women out there who've been to like a baby shower or a wedding shower. Guys, I don't know what you do at your bachelor parties because I'm a good Baptist girl, but you might go to a shower and they play that game where they give you the list and they're like, who's got the thing in the list like in their purse? I am good at that game. Battery, check. Band-Aid, check. Socks, extra keys, glasses, check, check, check. Got it all. I am ready to go. You get me out to my car, I can even produce even more stuff. Prepared. Why? Because that gives me a sense of security, that I know that I have planned and prepared for all possible scenarios and outcomes. Also, I have 3 boys. It's not uncommon for me to need an extra pair of socks. Like, it happens. So, the other thing, because the Enneagram 6s sit right in the middle of that kind of head triad, they're thinkers. They're always in their head. They're thinking all the time because they're coming up with a plan to be prepared in case something goes wrong. They're thinking it through. These people are going to make great project managers at work, right? They're going to have everything kind of laid out. They're going to be very well prepared. They have a tendency to believe that thinking is the same as doing. Once you kind of thought everything through, then it's just a matter of implementing what's going to happen. This may or may not be a problem in our wonderful 20 years of marriage. This has happened before. I insist that I told Jeff something. Like, didn't you know I told you about this? Nope. I thought about it, had an entire conversation in my head about it, but I never said the words out loud. So it gets him off the hook sometimes, but not the time he left Elliot at school. So you're going to hear your Enneagram 6s say things like, let me think about that. You ask them a question, let me think about that. Or they're going to say, kind of going back to that be prepared, common thing you're going to hear them say is, just in case. Let me pack this just in case. Let's bring this along just in case something happens. So because they have a tendency to be like really worst case scenario thinkers too, like they're going to think the worst is going to happen. So when it does, you want 6s on your team. Like they're going to be ready to go because they thought that bad thing was going to happen. So they are ready to bring in the plan that they have thought about at 3 o'clock in the morning to implement it. They're going to be really good at that. And kind of your last thing on the good side of 6s, they're team players. They are committed. They love to be a part of a group. They love to be a part of a cause. These are the people you're going to find that are your volunteer base. They're your PTA people. They're the ones leading your scout troop. They love nothing better than be part of a team. And one of the ways they're going to kind of draw you in is to find common ground, and they're going to do it, as you may have noticed, through humor, right? They're going to tell a few jokes, right? It kind of takes away from their anxiety a little bit, and it lets them kind of draw people in, so we're all on the same team together. They don't have a problem kind of making fun of themselves for a joke. You're going to have a lot of comedians, right, who kind of fall into this Enneagram 6 role. But here's kind of the bad part. Here's where 6s get themselves in trouble. They have a lot of self-doubt. Because they are thinking all the time, they have this chorus in their head kind of telling them what to do. They have an uncanny knack for getting forgetting like previous successes. They don't remember when they were successful before. They let that worry and anxiety kind of creep up, and so they're never quite sure. So they're gonna process out loud a lot. So if you got someone who's always kind of bouncing ideas off of you all the time and it gets kind of tiring and exhausting, that, my friends, is your Enneagram 6. And because they don't know what to do, they seem to have lost this ability to come up with ideas on their own. They don't have that gut instinct. They are going to be indecisive. They're going to make up their mind. Then they're going to change their mind. Then they're going to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, you know that trampoline that we have in the backyard and Hurricane Ian's coming through? I think we need to go take it down in the middle of the night, right? They're going to do that to you. And they're going to kind of have like this analysis paralysis. They're going to try to, they won't be able to make a decision. So they have this feeling that life happens to them instead of kind of taking responsibility for making something happen. And then the last little thing I'm going to tell you about our Enneagram 6s, and this is unique to them, and so I'm going to kind of throw it in here as a bonus. 6s, you may not recognize them sometimes because they're going to kind of give in to their fears, or they're going to be super brave and surmount their fears. And you may not recognize them. So you're going to get kind of your phobic Enneagram 6s who kind of hide and worry, and they're buried in their anxiety, and they become increasingly paranoid. Or you're going to have these counterphobic 6s, and you can mistake them for another type because they're bold, and they're brave, and they're rash, right? If they're afraid of heights, they become mountain climbers. These are those type of people who are going to face their fears. So at their best, your Enneagram 6s are going to be brave and decisive and confident, and at their worst, your Enneagram 6s are going to be paranoid, and they're going to blame, and they're going to be rash, and they're going to make bad choices. And when you put all of that together, I've got a Bible character for you this morning. And I got to tell you, I'm excited about this. We're going to reveal it in just a second, because every time you like Google and you do like, which office character am I? Enneagram 6 gets Dwight Schrute. So I was really worried about this, but when I started researching it, we get Peter. Right? This is your Enneagram 6 character right here. So excited because Peter is the man. You might know Peter is one of the disciples of Jesus. And he's not just any disciple. When they list these guys out in the gospel, Peter is the first one right there on the list, right? Because Peter is loyal. He is faithful. He is the classic Enneagram 6. Now, how does Peter come to be a disciple? If you've got this loyalist, but they're full of self-doubt, they have this skepticism about them, how does he possibly believe that Jesus, this man who's shown up on the scene, is the Son of God? Well, the first introduction we know that Peter has is through his brother Andrew. Andrew was already following John the Baptist, that's Jesus' cousin, and John the Baptist was already proclaiming that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus was the chosen one. Jesus was the one the Jews were searching for. So Andrew goes and he tells Peter, this is the guy we should be following. And that's great because Peter is hearing this information from a trusted source first, right? He's kind of primed the pump. So by the time Peter is called to be a disciple, he's kind of ready to go because he trusts them. I have a brother and sister. I put a lot of trust in what they tell me since we become adults. So when Jesus comes to Peter, right, you may be familiar with this story when Peter is called to be a disciple. Jesus comes to Peter. He's like, hey, I want to teach these people out here. Can I borrow your boat? You see, Peter is just a fisherman. So he's out fishing with his brother Andrew, James and John. You may have heard of them before. They're fishing all night. They get nothing in their nets. Peter's like, sure, you can borrow my boat. We're just over here fixing nets. So Jesus delivers his message from the boat, great acoustics out there on the water. And when it's over, he tells Peter, he's like, hey, throw your nets down in that water. Peter, the skeptic, says, no, I'm not going to do that. No fish all night. What a waste of time. But he does it anyway. I don't know, maybe Andrew elbows him, gets him to do it, throws down the nets. They come out, those nets are full. And let me tell you, Peter sees this with his own eyes. All of his skepticism is blown away. It's erased and it's eradicated. And so when Jesus says, come, I will make you fisher of men. You can be one of my disciples. You don't have to fish here anymore. We're going to go out for a bigger, better cause. Peter is on board. And let me tell you, at this point, if he is truly an Enneagram 6, Peter is vibing. He's with his group. He's with his team. He's got this cause, and it's not just any cause. It is the underdog cause. Nobody thought that this guy from Nazareth, who is just a carpenter, was going to be the Messiah, right? So Peter's on this team. They're the underdogs. He's got his trusted advisor in Jesus. He's got this whole team he can bounce ideas off of. They are doing something bigger for the kingdom. And that is where we find Peter right here in Matthew 14. And this story, right, it starts with immediately. This is immediately after the feeding of the 5,000. Probably one of the most famous miracles you're going to see. Pops up in all 4 Gospels. Jesus, 5 loaves, 2 fishes, turns it into a harvest to feed the 5,000. So immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed him, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. I consider this like the mom version of like when your kids are really getting on your nerves, and so you tell them you're just going to go to the bathroom for a minute, and you like scroll on your phone. I think that's what happened to Jesus here, right? He was kind of tired of taking care of everybody for the day, so he just takes a minute, kind of pull himself together and pray. And so then later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it, right? We got a little bit of a storm kicking up. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to him, flexing. He's walking on the lake, right? He walks out. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. And they said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. I think that's great. It's a ghost. That must be the logical explanation. The Messiah, the Son of God, we've seen him do miracles. This must be a ghost. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." But then Peter says, "Lord, if it's you." I love this about Peter. I love that he says that, right? Jesus is out there walking on the water. He just said, "It's me." He just did the feeding of the 5,000. He's performed countless miracles for Peter. He even came to his own house and healed Peter's mother-in-law, right? Peter has been right there to see it, but he still needs that last little check-in. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." So Jesus says, "Come." And then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus, right? This is the brave. This is the bold. This is the confident side of Peter, right? He's that counterphobic. He's going to face his fears, and he's going to walk out on that water to meet Jesus because he's loyal. He wants to show that he's part of this team. But when Peter, here he's going, he's focused, right? But then when he saw the wind, and when he saw the waves, and that doubt creeped in, he was afraid, right? There's the flip side of it right there. Bold into caving into his fears immediately. And beginning to sink, he cried, "Lord, save me." And so immediately Jesus reached his hand and caught him. And he said, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" Right? Peter's full of doubts. He couldn't help doubting. He needed to be full of faith. And we find that in Peter. You would think that Peter had kind of learned his lesson from this story, but he doesn't. Peter goes on to kind of display one of the largest mistakes, shall we say, later on. He didn't learn from walking on the water. We have another story that you may all be familiar with that appears in all 4 Gospels. And I got to tell you, this hurts because not many stories appear in all 4 Gospels, right? The 4 Gospels are the first 4 books of the New Testament. They tell the story of Jesus' life. Each person, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tells the story a little bit different. Some include some stories, some don't. But this story appears in all 4 Gospels, and it's Peter's betrayal. You're going to know this story, right? It's right before Jesus is arrested, before he's crucified, and he tells Peter, he's like, "Look, before all this goes down, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter's like, oh no, I am not going to do that. I am not going to deny you 4 times. There's no way. I'm not going to do that. And he's like, nope, before the rooster crows, before the morning comes, after I'm arrested, you're going to deny me 3 times. And it's true. Peter does that. And it says when he denies Jesus, he weeps bitterly. But here's the other thing that we know about Peter. And this story specifically as it relates to Peter's relationship with Jesus and this confidence that Jesus has in Peter. There's another story that appears 4 times in the gospel. And this one's known as Peter's profession. And that's what we're finding right here in Matthew 16. Right up until this point, this is right after Jesus walks on the water. That was just back in Matthew 14. We come here because the disciples are still trying to figure out who is this Jesus, right? Jesus says, am I just another prophet like that you've seen in the Old Testament? Am I just some teacher with some wise words? Disciples, who do you think I am? Like, who are you? And this is Peter's profession. He says this right here. He answers, and you notice it says he's Simon Peter at this point. You are Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replies, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, right? This isn't what you're seeing. This isn't these miracles. This isn't that act of bravery when you did the crazy thing when you got on the boat and walked across the water, right? This isn't anything physical that's happening to you, right? But this is revealed by my Father in heaven, right? You might hear this called like faith or divine intervention. This is the only way that Peter is able to answer this question. So Jesus goes on to say, and I tell you that you are Peter. Up until this point, actually, Peter was named Simon. But in this verse right here, Jesus is changing Peter's name from Simon to Peter. And this word is Greek. I'm not going to do a lot of Greek this week like Josh does, but I will tell you this one thing, that means rock. And so he says, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it, right? It's like an action movie, right? He says this incredible phrase because this is what Jesus knows about Peter. He knows that he's going to doubt. He knows that Peter is filled with these 2 counterpoints in his life, the brave versus the fearful. And Peter just sometimes can't work it out, and he's gonna make his mistakes. And while he wants to be loyal, he's gonna give into that fear and skepticism at times. But Christ has the confidence in Peter because he knows, right? Jesus knows what's gonna happen. He knows that he's gonna be arrested. He knows that he's gonna die. He knows he's gonna be raised on the 3rd day. And he also knows that he's going to leave, and he's going to leave this church in the hands of his disciples and those who are left to spread his word and to build that church. And he needs someone like Peter. He needs someone who's going to be committed and faithful and is going to hold this team together because they start losing it right here until they kind of get their groove going and start the early church. So he has confidence in Peter that's who that's who needs to lead the early church. So here's what I want to leave you with today for our Enneagram 6s out here. And here's our bottom line. The opposite of fear is not courage, it's faith. All that courage that Peter displayed when he got out of that boat and walked across the water, when Jesus was arrested, Peter pulled out a sword and lopped off the ear. He Van Gogh'd one of the soldiers right there. He was brave. He had courage. But that wasn't what Peter needed. He needed faith. He needed to believe. And it was there in Peter all along. And Jesus saw that in him, right? In another version of this story that we have of Jesus changing Peter's name, it's over in Luke. He knows what's going to happen, right? He knows that Peter's going to walk. He says, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. But, right, it doesn't say but it says, and when you have turned back, he knows this is going to happen. You will strengthen your brothers. And that's when he changes Peter's name so that he is the rock on which the church is built. So if I have said something, guys, to you today that sounds a little familiar, maybe there's somebody that you know and love that is an Enneagram 6, and you are recognizing this little bit of worry, this little bit of bravery, this extra bit of planning that they have. Here's my encouragement of something you can do to encourage this person in your life. So for one, you're going to want to listen to their concerns. An Enneagram 6 is never going to tell you they're a pessimist. They are a realist. These things could and indeed may happen. So you're going to want to listen to their concerns. I wouldn't enable them. I wouldn't let the clock run on forever, but it's going to help them a lot if you will listen to their concerns. And then the second thing is if you can encourage them. Basically, you have to be Jesus. I'm not asking you too much, right? You want to encourage them. You want to remind them of their past successes, that there are things that they can do that they are very capable of. And if you, my friends, if you are an Enneagram 6, here's what I want to encourage for you right here. I want you to do something bold. I can't do that. I want you to do something bold. I want you to try something you never have. And this can be that pair of, red Converse you have sitting in your Amazon cart that you just haven't bought yet, because all Enneagram 6s have a big cart full of things they haven't decided they're going to buy. But I really would prefer that you do something bold in your faith. Right? Try something new in your faith. Maybe today you've been coming to this church and you're like, I want to see more what this church is about. I want to try joining a small group. I want to try volunteering. Right? Maybe there's some way that you can plug into the church. Maybe you want to decorate your car and come out to trunk or treat. Maybe there's something bold that you can do to be part of this church. But if you're not quite there yet as an Enneagram 6, and you're up at night and you're worried and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not ready for those bold steps, you're in a little bit darker place in your life, and I've been in that darker place in my life before, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to memorize some scripture. And when those fears creep in, and when you can't remember your successes, and when you can't be bold and confident and brave, I want you to repeat this scripture to you. I'm going to give you a starter for you, and it's Philippians 4, 6 through 7. Any warriors out here, you're going to know this one, right? Do not be afraid of anything, but through everything, through prayer and petition, give your fears to God, and the peace of God, which transcends everything, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So with that, guys, I'm going to close this in prayer. Father, I am grateful for those that are here this morning. I am grateful for all of the different personality types that you can bring us together so that we can recognize our own strengths and weaknesses, our strengths and weaknesses in others, and we can relate those back to these Bible characters so that we can be bold, we can be confident, and do amazing things for your kingdom.